Hey Val and Middle, welcome back to another G67 math video. Tonight we're going to be adding and subtracting positive and negative decimals. Let's start off with a trivia question today. How long are the world's longest fingernails? Kind of an interesting question submitted by one of my fans. Let's get to the trivia tonight, or the target tonight. Officially, I can add and subtract positive and negative decimals. Let's do this thing. Here's a problem I dreamed up. It's pretty true. My credit card bill arrived yesterday. I owe $3,250.78. In the time since MasterCard sent me that bill, I charged another $723.11. How much do I owe them altogether? Well, generally people think about debt, like when you owe something, as a negative number. So if I were to write this out in a number sentence, I can think of this as negative $3,250.78. It's a decimal, right? Plus another negative $723.11. Well, you could probably figure out how much I owe them all together. All you really need to do is add those two numbers together, correct? And put a negative sign in front of it. I owe them about $4,000, a negative $3,973.89. You with me? All right, don't forget to add the labels. That's the proper answer for that question. Let's review a few things real quick. First of all, a decimal, that's a fraction whose denominator is a power of 10. This is the tenths, this is the hundredths, and whose numerator is expressed by figures placed to the right of a decimal point. So here's the decimal point, and these are the numerators, correct? Really, when we think about it, if I could put a fraction bar underneath these two, it would be 2 and 45/100ths, or 2.45. So just so you understand how the decimals work and how they relate to fractions. A negative decimal is any number that's expressed as a decimal that is less than 0. All right? Negative $3,200 and something dollars I owe. That's in 29 cents. That was a negative decimal. All right. And I think it's also important that you remember that 5 minus 3 is the same as 5 plus a negative 3. I'll be using this a number of times tonight. It's really important you understand why those two things are the same. If you don't, stop, draw the number line, and do it yourself. You'll see that they are identical. All right, here's some general rules I use that really make, I think, adding and subtracting negative numbers manageable. First of all, if you're going to add two positive numbers together, this is just what you've been doing since second grade. Just add them and keep the positive sign. 1 plus 1, that's 2. Likewise, if you're going to add two negative numbers, like a negative 1 and a negative 2, okay? Sorry, a negative 1 and a negative 1, that would be negative 2, all right? Makes sense, right? Because I added two different negative numbers together to get my total MasterCard bill. That makes sense. Here's where it gets a little bit different, but I think we can work with this. If the two numbers, if you're going to add two numbers with different signs, find the difference between the two numbers, so you're going to subtract, and to give the sign of the larger number. So let's just take a look at a couple of examples here. We have negative 10 plus 7. All right, so looking at these two numbers, I've got one of each, opposite signs, a negative 10 and a positive 7. So I know that my answer is going to be negative. It says to keep the sign of the larger number, so this is the larger of the two, so that's a negative 10. It'll be a negative answer. And then I find the difference. I take 10 and I subtract 7. 10 minus 7 is 3. Keep the sign of the bigger number, negative 10. Okay? All right, important to realize that negative 10 is not larger than 7. What we're really doing is we're thinking of the absolute value of that number. The absolute value of negative 10 is greater than the absolute value of 7. The absolute value talks about the absolute distance from 0 on a number line. Okay? If you want to think about it as ignoring the sign, that's what you can think about in terms of tonight's lesson. We'll talk about absolute value a little bit later, but absolute value is that distance the negative 10 is from 0 on the number line, and it would be 10 spaces. This would be 7 spaces. So this one would be larger absolute value-wise. All right, take a look at this example up here. We have 20.20, and we're going to take away or subtract 10.1. Some people say, well, they're not two different signs there. Yeah, there are, because remember, when you're subtracting something, you're really adding a negative. So this one is positive and this one is negative. Anytime you take away something, 5 minus 3, you're working with a negative number here. You had 5 and you're taking away these. You're subtracting a negative here. I'm sorry, you're adding a negative to it. You're taking away. All right? The answer to that would simply be this. 10.1. Now, a lot of kids have said, well, how do you do this on a calculator? Tonight we're going to have to do it by hand, but I do think it's important that you know how to. Most of you have this simple 4-function calculator like this. And so to enter this problem, you just put 20, whoops, 20, whoa, 20.20, and we're going to subtract, oops, let's add it. We're going to add, we'll do this one here, 10.1, and then we'll just hit the negative key. There it is. Okay, I'll show you how to do this one here. It's 1 and it's negative, and I'm going to add, sorry, I forgot to clear that out. It's 1, then hit the negative key, and I'm going to add another 1 that's negative to get my negative 2. Okay, down here, 10 and it's negative, and I'm going to add 7, negative 3. Okay, so that's how you use the calculator. I'm going to put that way. We won't be using it tonight. We'll be working these by hand. So let's get into it and work some problems. I put down KISS, keep it simple. That's because I want to try to use simple numbers tonight, so we don't have to focus so much on trading and difficult adding and subtraction, but simpler numbers to work with. So I have a lot of problems that look similar with a lot of 2s, 3s, and 1s in there. All right, so we have a negative 2.107, and we need to subtract 1.01. All right, this can look a little intimidating, but what we have to do here is, first of all, I think about this as negative 2.107 minus 1.01. I think of it as negative 2.107 plus another negative 1.01. So now I'm thinking about it. I've got these two are really the same sign. I have a negative and I got a negative. In this case, I know that according to my little rules, I just add them, and then I'm going to keep the same sign, which is negative. All right, but don't forget to line up the decimals. You saw that flashing sign up there. So let's add these guys up. I've lined them up here. I've lined up the decimals, and you notice I didn't put any negative signs. It just says to add them up, and then we're going to put the negative sign over here. So 7 plus 0 is 7, 0 plus 1 is 1, 1 plus 0 is 1, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3.117. Now, that's a negative plus a negative, so this is a negative answer here, a negative 3.117. Okay? All right, I'm going to have you try a problem very similar to that. Go ahead and try this one here. Don't forget to line up the decimals. Go ahead and try it. Okay, let's see how you did. Okay, did you rewrite the problem? A negative 3.102 plus a negative 2.22? Maybe you didn't need to. I do. It helps me to go that I'm adding two negatives together, because then I know I'm going to keep the same, they're the same sign. I'm just going to add them, and I'll keep the same sign here, which is negative, because they're both negatives. All right, so let's take a look. I lined them up, lined up my decimals. I added them straight up. 2, 2, 3, 5. That's a negative, because it's a negative plus a negative 5.322. All right, let's take a look at a different problem for instruction. Now I have a negative 4.1378, and I'm going to add 1.01. All right, well, these here have different signs. Now I've got a negative and I've got a positive. So this is that case where I need to find the difference between these two numbers, because I've got a whole bunch negative here and I've got a little positive. So I'm going to subtract to see how much I bailed myself out. Or my negative number is going to be a little bit smaller because this one's positive. So basically I got minus 4 and I'm going to add 1. My answer is going to be like minus 3, right? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to find the difference, and we know that our answer is going to be negative. And you could put a negative symbol up there right now if you wanted to. I'm going to add it at the end. So here I go. I'm going to line up my decimals. I got 4.1378, and I'm going to subtract, because I'm finding the difference between these two. I'm going to subtract 1.01. I had to add a couple of placeholders here because there's more decimals here. So I can just add as many zeros on as I want. When I subtract away, 8, 7, 3 minus 1 is 2, 1 minus 1 is 1, 4 minus 1 is 3. 3.1278. And of course, that's negative. So remember my estimate I had in my head? It's about negative 4 plus 1. Yeah, I meant negative 3 something. My answer makes sense. I've got my decimals lined up. I'm confident. All right. I'll have you try one very similar to that. Go ahead. Don't forget to line up the decimals. All right, let's see how you did. You are correct. These have different signs. So you're going to need to find the difference between the two. Your answer will be negative. So I'm going to show you my work here. I lined them up. 5.1009 minus 1.0010. I subtracted away. Okay. Looks like I had to do some trading here a little bit. There's my trades. I had minus 4.0999. Okay. All right. And it is negative. And it makes sense. I got about 5, and I'm going to take away 1. It's going to be about 4. Negative, correct? Negative 5. Add 1. Sorry about that. I reset that wrong. Okay, let's go on. How about this one? Yikes. Well, the first thing I'm looking at here is I have a negative minus another negative. Well, what I'm really doing here is I'm taking away a negative. And when you take away a negative, it's really the same as adding. So I've rewritten this problem, changed these to plus signs, so it's really negative 6 plus 1.44. I have different signs, so I got to find the difference again. And this time my answer is going to be negative because, I have more negative. The absolute value of negative 6 is greater than the absolute value of 1.44. So I know my answer is going to be negative. So go ahead and line these guys up. Got to make some trades here. I end up with 4.56. And my answer is going to be negative again because remember I had negative 6 minus a negative 1.44. I knew my answer was going to be negative. So it's kind of nice to figure out if your answer is going to be positive or negative beforehand. And sometimes I would even put the little negative thing up there. Then go ahead and do the work just so I don't forget to make that the sum or the difference negative. All right, have you try one like that. Okay, you're being so patient with me. I'm just going to roll this down and let you take a look at the answer and how I worked it out. Should have had a negative 2.1. I know it's kind of weird, but you're taking away a negative, which is the same as adding. All right, I think I have one more. There's a yeah, but look at this one. 0.3102 minus 2.22. So I've got a positive 0.31. That's like a positive 1/3, roughly. And I'm going to subtract 2 wholes and a quarter almost. So I know how to do this in a number line, but how do you do this on paper? Well, you got different signs. You got a positive and you got a negative. So you know you're going to have to find the difference between the two. And you know that your answer is going to be negative because you've got more negative here. It's really a negative 2.22. Well, when you subtract, you also know that you have to have the larger number up on top. It doesn't work to put this smaller number up there. So I had to rewrite that sentence as minus 2.22, you see it right there, adding 0.3102. Well, then I can find the difference. I put the bigger number on top and I subtract it out. And here are my trades. I ended up with a negative 1.9098. That is my answer. And I can go all the way up here too, either place. Okay, I'm going to have you try one. Go ahead and give it a shot. All right, let's see how you did. Well, they're different signs. You got to find the difference. You know your answer is going to be positive. Because this number is larger than this number, so this one had to go on top when you found the difference. 5.010 minus 2.101. Let's just think about it. You're at negative 2 on the number line. You're going to add 5. Well, it'll take 2 to get you to 0, and you'll have about 3 more. There's your 3. Again, constantly I'm working that number line in my head. All right, here's your ticket to the show. Go ahead and write these problems down. And we're ready for the trivia question. I have to be honest with you. This one here kind of freaked me out a little bit at first. How long are the world's longest fingernails? All right, parents, you might, if you have a sensitive stomach, children and parents, you might want to turn this one off. But all right, here they are. Yikes. Uh, this is Mr. Shalil, I believe his name was pronounced. I watched a little video on it. And he's been growing these for 62 years. And at first I was thinking like, wow, this is weird. This is kind of gross. Then there's a little interview online where it talks about this guy. It talks about um, how difficult his life was and people accepting him and things like this. And it was really an interesting interview to watch and just some of the different things. You know, he has not been able to work very much, obviously, with this on his hand, but it kind of became his identity, and it's kind of a cool little interview. It's translated so you can understand him. But anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed. Oh, I forget how long they are. I think it's about 200 inches. But go ahead and look it up. They're long. Okay, take it easy. Have a good evening. Bye.